cap feels like surrender to everything that you didn't know you needed.
Cap feels like a tremendous amount of energy flowing through my body. There was things that really you can't hardly describe. It's one of those things that you have to experience for yourself.
So yo, welcome to another episode of the Love Podcast. I have Jameelah, one of my good friends who relocated here to Costa Rica, and she has a very interesting story and a lot of knowledge on a lot of spiritual aspects of life. And so I want her to dig in, and there's some things I don't know about her that I'm going to get to know right now on camera, so it's perfect. And introduce yourself, and then probably just start off, from childhood, and we'll just take it from there.
I love it. Thank you for having me on this show. I'm a big fan. Always really interesting. Myself. So I am Jameelah. I'm a Southern girl. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. My mama's side is from Birmingham, Alabama. And my dad's side is from Atlanta. And yeah, we have a really interesting background. On my mom's side, there's a lot of Black Native. A lot of people don't even know that there were Black people here in the United States prior to its colonization.
That came from Africa.
Came from Africa, but like Pangea time, wow. Like there were Black people before the African slave trade in America, and they're called Aboriginals basically, and we developed the term Black and, really identified as African American, which, we are, because Africa is where all life began. But also there's a chunk of Black people in the United States that were there, that are part of the indigenous population. And a lot of, I think, the terminologies have been used so that way reparations basically can never be given. So yeah, it's really interesting learning that history with it being a part of my history.
For sure.
And having the African side and the Islander side from my dad's side in Atlanta, and then my mother's side having, kind of more of a mix. We got a lot of Creole, we got some New Orleans on that side. Mm-hmm. It's just much more of a mix. And yeah, kind of connecting to my ancestry in that side has been very opening for my heart.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And so in your childhood, I remember we were talking before we actually came over here, you were talking about working through traumas from childhood. When did that start, and how did you do that?
Right. Well, a lot of trauma I had in my childhood I was unaware of, like a lot of us are as kids. You just think of it as life. But I grew up with a lot of physical and emotional abuse that was passed down generationally. So there was also intergenerational trauma. We also often can forget that we spend 9 months inside of our mother's mother, because women develop baby girls essentially develop their eggs while they're in utero. Wow. So you're spending literally time hearing your mother's heartbeat, what she's eating, what she's feeling. Science shows us through epigenetics that a lot of that gets translated into the DNA, like how our nervous system functions. Like if we need to be running and quick to high alert, we're going to develop ADD and anxiety really easily. And you know what I mean? Because we got to be on point. And
I never thought about that.
Yeah, it gets really layered real quick, and really you're not just you you are at least, looking back at a lot of indigenous populations, they counted all the way back at least 7 generations, because it takes crazy. From a genetic point of view, it takes at least that many generations for you to be genetically different from, where you're no longer family.
Exactly.
So all those people have a play into the way that your instincts, let's say, if they don't define you, but they do shape you.
Exactly.
And you can shape yourself. That's a beautiful thing that I've been learning, is that none of this shit is permanent. We all have, it's all gooey. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you can always rewire your brain and reshape yourself and reinvent yourself.
Yes. That part. And so it wasn't until later in life, I'd say my mid-20s, that I started to really understand the amount of trauma that I went through, because it was just life at the time. It was oh yeah, everybody,
this is normal.
This is normal. Everyone's dodging knives, and
So at what point did you realize that? Well, damn, this was traumatic.
Yeah,
I need to work through this.
That was probably right when I started to regulate my nervous system. So the first kind of healing modality, my very first healing modality, was probably acting, theater. I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was just being a creative person, but so much of that training is about like softening and like being able to tap into your emotions so that you can portray a character. So much of it is actually somatic. It's very much like somatic therapy, where you're just becoming aware. Really good. I think part of really good acting is being aware of what you have to know like how it's different from a character. So much like, and if you were to say, walk into a somatic therapist's office today, they'd probably start you off on like doing body scans and like knowing, like identifying what's actually going on. Like maybe you hold some anger in your shoulders or grief in your lungs, or, there's all this, again, research and studies of like how the body, hold really, they say the body keeps score. The body really does. It's like a map of what you've been through. And so when I started to open that up in acting, I didn't realize that that's what that was, but that was that was my first outlet. So I always had a very strong connection to my emotional body as an act, like from like 8, 9. I was a child actor in Atlanta. So like from like a young fucking age, like people would be looking at me like, how did you tap into that much rage and sorrow? It's because it wasn't mine. A lot of that stuff was intergenerational trauma that was being processed, you know what I mean, through me.
Yeah.
And then when I started getting into yoga was my first like wellness certification when I was like 19, I think. And that's when I started to feel stuff in my body. That's when I started to really recognize that like my hips held something specific and my neck held something else. And I started to like, I went to USC. Me and my sister are first generation college students in our family.
Nice.
And shout out to my sis.
Congrats on that one.
And my parents really didn't give us much of a choice. They were like, "Woo, niggas gonna go." Like, no, we sacrifice too much. You niggas gonna go ahead and get what you need to get.
Nah, it's but
I went, and that's where I saw these, for lack of a better word, white people who had like didn't pop off, like because where I grew up, in the house I grew up in, anger was like water. It was like allowed to be expressed. You were kind of
so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in your household, your family, they were indigenous to, half of your family was indigenous to the United States, but the other half, did anything have to do with any slavery or anything like that?
Slavery on both sides, because they slaved up all of them black natives. Yeah. There's slavery was on both sides, but the records of my mom's side are a little bit more. Me and my sister we've been doing some digging, and we've been figuring out some stuff. My dad's side is a little bit more more North and West Africa. We got a little island, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. That's more of what you think of when you think of African Americans. And my mom's side has some of that, but you can see it, especially in some of my cousins' faces. Like, we got a lot of a mix of different things. And in the house I grew up in Atlanta, there was just a lot of mental, and probably a lot of people can relate to this, a lot of just abuse. And mental illness, unchecked, undiagnosed mental illness. Because when I grew up, you didn't have mental illnesses in a lot of black communities. You were just like, he just wasn't right.
Exactly.
Or,
exactly.
Like the PTSD.
He has the temper.
Yeah, exactly. Like
people didn't. That's something else.
So people didn't seek treatment. And awareness is such a powerful tool to be able to know what to look out for, to be able to be sensitive to someone's triggers, to be able to call shit out. Like, that right now to me as an adult, navigating this world, it's something I lean on, is awareness and communication with people about what I'm going through. I'll tell them I'm triggered right now.
Yeah.
There's a term in somatic therapy I love. It's like I'm flooded. It means like I could pop off.
Exactly. Exactly. I can overflow at any time.
Yeah, I'm flooded, and it's just a code for people. Okay, let me get you some water, and then I check myself. I'm like, do I need to take a nap? Do I need to eat something? Do I need to drink? Because a lot of times it'll just be something as simple as like, drinking some motherfucking water.
Just taking a little break.
Just taking a break, taking a walk. Go outside. Like all these tools and tips, like they are indigenous to our people pre-colonization. Like we wrote the book on that shit, but we've been really disenfranchised from our own wisdom and healing through colonization. It was demonized, where we couldn't speak our language, we couldn't practice our, with our medicinal gifts. Like when you think about how it's all been demonized to the point where people would be killed for doing it.
Yeah,
we're kind of cut off from what makes us us.
And so you think that the trauma stemmed, I guess, from slavery?
Yeah,
that's where the anger, the trauma, and then
I look at what I love my mama to death, for sure. But when I look at some of the trauma she laid onto me and my sister, I can't say shit, because I can look back at the trauma that she went through and recognize that she did a lot better. You know what I mean? And because that was even worse. My
It's
mother
crazy.
grew up with no shoes and chickens in the yard. Like
The generational trauma is real, huh?
it's real. And like the poverty, like not food scarcity, like that
Mhm.
stuff translates in the womb. Like not knowing where your next meal is going to come from
That's
poverty.
crazy.
Because these whole communities were cut off from resources.
Exactly.
It wasn't that Black people weren't generating wealth and building beautiful things. It's that it kept being destroyed by post, what do you call it, the Jim Crow era.
Yeah. And then when you got to college, that's when you were like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say like the white privilege is like real, but it's like they did get a head start.
I just
so,
saw
like,
it was like it was like going to a different country. Honestly, moving from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles, California at 18. Any other place in the world, that distance would be a different country.
yeah,
And so it was a different country for me because I would, they call USC, one of the nicknames is University of Spoiled Children because a lot of like really wealthy people send their kids there. And they also used to call it the University of South Central because it was pretty much on the edge of South Central LA.
Really?
So there was this really interesting dichotomy. I remember I was volunteering in a lot of like joint educational programs with the school where the schools would be really impoverished. And then I walk across to the campus and like my friend who's from Texas, whose parents are like billionaires, literally billionaires, are throwing a fundraiser gala for something, and I'm just like, it was just like cognitive dissonance. It was like, wow,
that's
like,
crazy.
Both these things exist. And then that was the first time where I started to check my emotion, my relationship with my emotions. Because like I said, growing up in my house, he who was loudest, you know what I mean? Who was like what meant it the most.
Exactly.
It was almost a sign of like the passion that you had. It was okay to kind of pop off as long as you didn't cross the line with your parents. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like anger was like very much there. And then I remember like one of my first relationships in Los Angeles, and like the guy was just kind of like, "You've lost so much of your power getting this anger." He said something to that effect, and I would just realize that like popping off isn't really a sign of like power in the situation. Yeah. You're actually like really powerless. You're really easily controlled and manipulated when you are that angry and you're out of control and you're not actually thinking clearly at all. And I started being like, maybe that's not the flex I thought it was to like be the most ferocious. Mm-hmm. And so I started to really, and I realized how unhealthy it was for my body too. Like, that's why we see so much high blood pressure and shit in our communities, and even like weight gain and shit, because that's like a fight or flight, always going into that. It's not healthy. Mm-hmm. So yoga was the first thing that really taught me to slow myself down and to really like check my emotions and watch them. Follow closely by meditation. Meditation and yoga to me came kind of hand in hand.
Meditation, huh?
Yeah, because yoga, it was originally kind of created just so that your body could be centered enough to meditate. That's the real purpose of exercise, is just to get your body not to hurt enough so you can sit your behind down,
meditate,
and actually meditate. Because when you meditate, that's when you can connect to God, to your ancestors, whatever you want to call it. Like that's when you're connecting to source. And if praying is talking to God, meditation is listening. That's when you get the information.
Yeah, see, like with meditation, I always have a problem like shutting off my brain. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So that's like the key, I guess, to shut off your brain and then like let the thoughts flow in. But I'm always like thinking about something,
right? And I think that's honestly, I love teaching meditation. I'm about to start teaching a class here because I've done it. I used to
take that class.
I'm gonna do it, man, because I feel like this town needs it. It was some of the first things that I got trained in after yoga. I actually have 3 different meditation credentials, and the first one came shortly after yoga. And yeah, it's almost like instead of thinking about not having any thoughts, it's almost more like, can I just observe the thoughts? Like trying to stop the thoughts from the beginning is like trying to stop, a bus pipe, water coming out of bus pipe. Like it's a conditioning. You're gonna be thinking. It's fine to think. It's just can there be a little space between you and the thought? Can there be something outside of the thought, watching the thought happen? Mm-hmm. And once you start developing that habit of just watching the thought, now you can start to like move the thought and like shrink it, and like and play with the thought. And I feel like I still, when I meditate, I don't not think. It's just that I'm aware that they're thoughts.
Yeah.
So they don't have then I have the option. Do I want to buy this thought or do I want to let it just go?
Like, no. Makes sense. Makes sense. Like you're controlling the thoughts.
Yeah. They're not controlling you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, boom, you're at USC, and then you get into meditation. You start really like seeing yourself different, seeing maybe like the things that might have held you back in the past, noticing other individuals that you meet that don't have these similar issues, and then how does that flow into like acting, becoming a real like actress, and like taking it to that level?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think acting, it is more than just an art form. I think it teaches you how to literally be a better human being. Because with acting, you have to be so aware of not just like your physical body, as far as like how the character might move differently, but how the character might think differently. So one of my favorite acting coaches used to always say, as an actor, you're a historian, you're a psychologist, you know what I mean? You're like sociologist. Like, you have to understand so much of how you work, to be able to pull out more or less of yourself for a role. Because really, we're all each other. That's also something acting really, that's what I'm saying. Acting is spiritual. Like, I look at it, it's like, no, my spirituality didn't begin in the ashram. It began like fucking on the stage. You know what I mean? Because my grandmama used to always say, like, never judge a man until you walk a day in his shoes. You know what I mean? And what is walking in somebody's shoes if it's not acting, where you're like literally trying to put on the character? And so what you realize is that even like a character like Hitler is it's not as different from you as you think. And there are things in this life that you could obsess over that could, if you're left unchecked, could drive you to do some really
get you to that point,
heinous shit, or vice versa. Like, any human experience that is able to be had, like, we all can have it. And so once you stop seeing yourself as so separate from the total, you can start to really like play yourself almost like a piano of, okay, well, this isn't very pronounced in me, but the character has this. And so where in my life is that one little thing? Okay, can I turn that up? How can I raise those stakes so that I would match that person? Or do I need to like kind of really more than it's more taking things down. It's more stripping away of what you think your egoic is, who yourself is at the core, because at the core, there's a truth. And then you just kind of fall into a flow state. Really, true acting is just like basketball. It's like that real moment when you're playing a sport, like that real moment hits.
Really?
That real moment hits, because I used to play ball too. That's the thing.
That's a good analogy, because I'm like,
because think about when you get that flow state when you're playing any sort of sport, you're not really thinking. When your body is smarter than your mind, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just a thing.
It's just the thing that happens, and you just allow it. And that is really the core, to me, of both spirituality, creativity, love, manifestation. It's the core of life, being able to just like allow and realize you don't have to spend so much time creating and like muscling and like, when you get all the clever thoughts of, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, like that's when it doesn't go well. Like,
but do you think that like being an actress, I always thought that was a gift. Like that, I mean, you probably were like that since you were young, like okay to talk in front of people, outspoken, or no?
Yes and no. I would say yes, I am an exhibitionist in a lot of ways. Like, I don't mind being watched, but I think that can be cultivated as well. Like, I've seen people, what is it? I think it's Will Smith. Talent is not enough. It's like the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, you can have a talent for learning things, but it doesn't mean that somebody who doesn't have that talent can't outlearn someone with it.
Exactly.
So it does come down to discipline too, which is basically just self-love. Like, if you love yourself enough to say no to some like temporary shit in your life to cultivate something that you truly want, that's discipline.
Wow.
But we think, I know I was raised by like an ex, military man, too. So he, my dad, so like he taught me discipline was something that was really like hard and tough. And it took me a long time to change my relationship with discipline of like, no, discipline is my friend. Discipline is like my friend looking out for me, my best interests, And yeah, that's a part of it. That's what I think a part of a good actor is because you got to sit down and do the unglamorous shit too.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Which is like just studying the role and all of that. And same with the spirituality. Like, spirituality is more than just clothes and crystals and smoke and shit.
Yeah.
Like, you got to sit down with yourself every morning or every night and confront the parts of yourself that you maybe don't want to see. And that shit is very unglamorous.
And so now that we're in the acting part of things and in that part of your life, where did that branch into a spiritual awakening? Because at this point, when you're in college, there was no spiritual awakening as of yet.
No, the spiritual awakening came shortly after college. I went through kind of intense depression that I don't think people talk enough about.
Really?
Like I call it the end of the rainbow depression, because ever since I was like in middle school, people were like, gotta get straight A's, gotta get good grades in middle school so you can get into some good AP classes in high school. gotta get once I'm in high school, gotta get good 8 grades in high school so you can into a good college. My parents were very much like college.
Yeah.
Once you got in college, okay, you gotta go to college and get good grades in college so you can graduate and like have your dreams fulfilled.
Exactly.
And I did all those things. Like I thought I was an overachiever. Turns out that was also trauma. Because I wouldn't let myself, like, I graduated high school with a 4.2 GPA. 4.2, motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly.
I also was in every club. Like, I was running myself ragged. Like, you know what I mean? Just trying to be perfect. Really trying to overcome.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I want to say there's nothing wrong with that, but I guess there could be something wrong with that.
It's where it's coming from. If you're doing it to better yourself, bomb, good. If you're doing it because you want to be loved and respected, you know what I mean? Then you're giving away your power. And I think, honestly, a lot of racial trauma has a lot of, especially black women, but also black men out here in these streets thinking like, oh, if I'm smart enough, if I'm more beautiful enough, if I'm kind enough, then my race won't matter. I won't be beat by the police. I'll be treated differently. I'll be treated with respect. I won't be followed in stores. And the truth is, none of that shit matters. And so there was this disillusionment when I graduated from USC after believing all these lies.
Yeah. Well, you don't realize they're lies until you live through them.
Till you get to the end of the rainbow and there was nothing there. Like I got to the end of the rainbow and I was engaged at the time. I also got engaged at a really young age.
Left that out. You left that part out, so you were engaged. All right, cool. Okay.
But the problem it wasn't a problem, but it was at the time because I wasn't healed. He was a computer science major. And so he got out of college with like a, $80K, $90K job right away at Northrop Grumman. And I was an actor who was waiting tables. And like that different, he didn't have a problem.
And what was your major in college?
It was theater with a minor in film.
Oh,
so I went hard. I was like, that's what I was
doing. Thing, yeah.
That's what I was doing. And then the spirituality was like my main side project. It was yoga, it was meditation. It was like, it helped my acting. So I really loved it. And then when I went through this intense depression, after I graduated, it was mostly financial because I didn't have family to like help.
So you get out of college, you graduate. Obviously, you probably have some college loans you have to pay off.
Yeah. Right.
Now you're you're a struggling actor because you have to get gigs, but you have to make money.
Yes.
And you have to pay rent.
Yes.
And you have to maintain a relationship.
Yes.
And then you're depressed.
It was just a lot. I went through what they call a dark night of the soul, the first of two. And yeah, I was like immobilized, depressed at one point for a little bit in there. Like I was
immobilized, depressed.
What do you mean? There was a period where it was. Looking back at it, I didn't realize it at the time, but yeah, like it was hard for me to get out of bed. It was hard for me to. It took me out. Like I had also ran a marathon my whole life. You know what I mean? And I thought that I'd been told, how talented I was my whole life, and I was booking a good amount in Atlanta. And then the second I moved to LA, it was almost like they didn't know what to do with me there. It was like, as a dark-skinned black woman, I kept going out for ingenue parts because I was the age I was, like, young love interest. And I'd always get like callbacks and second callbacks. And you could tell that I was like the dark choice, for the black girl, like the black choice.
Yeah.
But at the time, the industry, it was still very much wanting, like, if they wanted more ethnically ambiguous, and they didn't really want to see dark-skinned black women like in a desirable role. They more wanted to see dark-skinned black women as like the 50-year-old woman who lost her son, like the Viola Davis, the civil rights leader that's struggling. Like they wanted to see women like we struggle.
So how did you function when this was going on with the depression? Like how'd
I pull myself out?
Yeah, like how did that work? Because you still had to work.
Mm-hmm.
You still had to function and live your life.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, I had to really ask myself some hard questions about like what I deeply wanted. That's where I ended up getting disengaged, as we called it, because we still kept dating, which was weird for a lot of our friends and family. but we just kind of eased out of that.
That's like getting a divorce but still living with each other.
Yeah, it was a little bit strange, but like we had a lot of love for each other, but it was just like again, like money is the number one reason couples break up.
For
and
sure.
He was a lot more comfortable with the difference than I was. I was the one that was like, no, I gotta like be this, and I just. Who I thought I was and who I was weren't matching, and so I had to.
It's so crazy that like literally money does that to you.
It can fuck you up.
Money does that to you, and like the way we live our lives in the States, it's kind of like you're going to college. Most people, like I had a scholarship, I played sports, but most people are paying for college, so you come out of college in debt, and then it's like, all right. Throw you to the wolves, find a job, Hopefully you can find a job that's going to pay you enough to be able to pay your college loans off, live your life, have fun, get a car note. It's just depressed. Like a lot of people are depressed.
It's a lot. We saddle in times where what your body, what your spirit is asking you to do is like to travel and to learn and to find out who you are. We saddle kids at that age, they're basically kids at that age group, with so much like financial pressure, so much pressure to societal pressure to like, you know, find a mate, to do all these things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, it wasn't, it all kind of came crashing down. Like my perfect persona, my ego kind of exploded on itself, which was a blessing, because I don't think I would have found all the spiritual practices I found if I hadn't been forced to.
Oh, really?
Because I mean, I had suicidal ideations.
Wow.
Like it was rough. It was rough for a minute, and I'd never experienced anything quite like that.
So
before.
you didn't have to speak to a therapist or anything like that at that point?
I did do a little. I did some therapy, but I couldn't keep affording to keep going to therapy.
And that costs money. Yeah, that's crazy.
We live in a crazy world. Therapy should be free. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it.
Money.
Therapy should be free. We should want all these crazy, people. You know what I'm saying? We all crazy a little bit.
Yeah.
Like everybody, like therapy should be free. Like we should have system. This country has enough money to like send, you know, bombs and wars.
Exactly.
Like we could, but the problem is they want us to be just like that. I mean, I'm just really glad that I didn't get on medication. I'm glad that I found spiritual practices that like helped me work through it. Breath work was crucial at that stage.
Oh, really?
Breath work became such a pathway like to my wholeness.
How did you find out about breath work?
I'm trying to remember, because now I'm looking back in time and trying to think, ooh, who was it?
I keep hearing, you know, I always hear about breath work. We always hear about meditation.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to get into the Kundalini activation process. And with these things, I'm like, it seems like all these things should be a natural thing that a human being should know how to do. Like with the breath.
Yeah.
It's like so important.
So important.
But people are like paying all this money for these breathwork classes. Yeah. I'm like, to breathe? I'm like how?
It's bizarre. What's even more bizarre is that the origins of a lot of these teachings come from indigenous and aboriginal people. And then they're adopted by Western culture, commodified, capitalistic machine comes and does its thing. And now people are priced out whose ancestors created it. And it's just like, it's all just as crazy.
Yo, that's so wild.
It's really
You know
crazy.
what else is wild when you think about that too? It's like, yo, they take you from Africa, right? And then they bring you all to the Caribbean, all to the States, all wherever, and they charge you for ancestry to find out who your real ancestors are.
It's just like
on 23andMe, all these places.
Right? I paid it. I had to know. Actually, it was a gift. It was a gift from the ex-fiance.
It's so funny. They take everything and they charge you to give it back to you.
I mean, that's what we're seeing now. Like even just some of the best therapy I'm learning now in the last couple of years. Some of the best therapy is literally ecotherapy. It's a term. It's a quantifiable thing that science can measure in your body.
And what is that?
That's like things like ocean, forest bathing. Like when you walk
nature.
In the forest, and you get to a certain point where there's more trees than frenetic human energy, you can literally feel your body downshift. You can feel your nervous system kick into parasympathetic, and it literally regulates your heart, your blood pressure, your cortisol levels of stress release. Like it is the pills that they're trying to sell you that make you sicker. Literally, you could go hug a tree. Literally.
Wow.
And you could get a better effects without all those side effects. And it's like that should be something that should be taught in schools. Like we should know how to what to do in those situations. Like you were saying, like how did you put yourself out of depression? We should have a playbook for that.
Exactly.
Instead of knowing what president, 16th president or something.
Like how did the breath work actually help? Like what did it do?
Well, I ended up getting certified in teaching breath work for a wonderful woman named Sadea Fox from Brooklyn, and it is
Brooklyn stand up.
She taught us. It was a specialized breath work actually on how to process intergenerational trauma, how to process racial trauma.
Wow.
So deep, which is basically PTSD, like the complex trauma. It's like how do you process trauma that's not just superficial or acute trauma or from one thing? How do you process trauma that's like stacked from not even your life? Exactly. You know what I mean? And that's what breath work does. It gets kind of scientific, but basically you're activating your alpha, different brain states. So we have, beta, which is waking consciousness. We have alpha, which is where meditation is, and like right when you first wake up in the morning. We also have theta and delta, and it's in these deeper states that rewiring goes on. It's in these deeper states that connection to source or God, or kind of those feelings where what's called non-duality, non-dual being Latin for not two. So not two means everything is one. So we've all had those feelings where you felt connected to every single thing. Whether sometimes it can happen in nature, sometimes you just, I don't know, there's a lot of different ways you can experience it, but we could all recount moments in our life where you're like, God, I felt like I was just so connected to everything there, and I felt really alive.
And I also remember, like, the one time I did do a guided meditation, it started off with the breath.
Yeah.
So that led into meditation.
Yeah, breath is life. Like when you think about when you're born, the first thing you do is, and then also when you die, the last thing you do is.
And also sometimes when you're like in a situation where you're very, very angry and you just, you like that breath.
Prana. It's literally like, it's life force energy. It's the beginning of Kundalini energy. It's part of Kundalini energy, pranic energy. And it's like, it cleanses you. It's like an ocean wave. It puts you back in flow with something greater than yourself.
And so that helped you get out. The breath work was the initial thing to help you get out of the depression. And
also creativity, expression. A lot of people think the opposite of depression is happiness. It's not. The opposite of depression is expression. It's creating. It's sharing. That's why it's so important in like AA or any other, to talk about your story, talk about what you went through. Like that's when the tears can come. That's when you can finally let go of some stuff.
Exactly.
It's really important to express yourself. And again, we allow like children to do it. And then right around like 8, 9, we start like making fun of people for being artistic or creative unless they can commodify it and make it be a millionaire with it.
Yeah.
Then we judge people who do it as if like you're not grown up or and it's really crazy because it's like we're supposed to sing, we're supposed to dance, we're supposed to like act and tell stories, we're supposed to animate, we're supposed to talk about our lives around the fire. Like that is part of how we process what happens to us.
Exactly.
And we live in a society that tells us we're supposed to just button all of that up. And we're not supposed to really grieve even when somebody dies. Like you're supposed to go to a funeral and say goodbye and cry a few tears and then like, okay, move on. Act like that person didn't exist. Like we really like it's not all of us, but it's the westernized society. It really has cut us off from our indigenous roots of grieving, of expressing, of just being like, just laying in this hammock. Like, the power of it laying in a hammock.
For sure. For sure. In nature.
Right?
For sure.
I grew up in a culture like where me laying in a hammock was considered lazy. And like someone would walk in the room and I would sit up like which really is a product of slavery.
I mean, yeah.
Because like literally your ass could be whipped. Like when I remember, okay, I tell you one of the people that helped me get out of it. I'm messing up her name. She's a doula. She's incredible. Her name is the Black Doula. That's her like handle. Y'all gotta like look her up.
The Black Doula.
The Black Doula. She taught me so much. I remember she was the first person to tell me like, Jameelah, like, every time you feel guilty for resting, I was explaining to her like, yeah, I feel guilty when I rest or when I like take a day off or anything like that, right? And she was saying, Jameelah, a lot of Black people hold within them an inner white overseer, unconsciously. That's basically like anytime you like relaxing or really just in the bath or just having a moment, that this like overseer comes up and like, get back to work, and then like, and then you're like, oh wait, let me get my computer.
That's crazy.
We don't, because there's this whole trope of us being lazy and all this stuff. When ironically, we literally built this country.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's crazy that they got us literally like afraid to rest, which is putting you in a constant state again of fight or flight. And so much of how I got out of that was like through rest, through like real proper rest, not hiding from myself through sleep, which is depression, or like zoning out watching Netflix, but like actually like sitting and breathing and like chilling, like eating food slowly, like these things. Like I really like had to relearn myself. And that was my first sort of egoic death of like letting all of that like old Jameelah go, that like, perfect hair, perfect, grades, perfect man, perfect like persona, and just realize like none of that matters. Like none of that actually makes you happy.
And then when did the next step come where you felt like, you know what, I don't want to live in the USA anymore? Like when did that jump? Because now you're past the depression.
Yes.
At some point you got on track.
Yes, I got on track. I started a nonprofit that mentored kids in the arts. That felt really good. I ran that for 8 years. It was called Imagine Us Free. It was beautiful. Like, I got my editing work really took off, and producing work took off. I had a lot of success at like just different festivals and winning editing awards, and like life was good. Like, I was thriving. But there was still something really missing, and it was me being in the United States. Like, me.
And I want to say kudos to Jameelah for actually getting out of that depression.
Yeah.
By using those modalities,
Mm-hmm.
breath work and these type of therapies, and not having to get put on depression pills, and a lot of people do, and they end up going down a spiral of a path.
Right.
So kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Go
and no shade for people that do opt that route. I don't have hatred for that type of medicine. I just think that it's misused in our culture, where it's over diagnosed. Over prescribed, and it should be used for short stints of time to get you to a certain place, and then weaned off so that you can take. You know what I mean?
Not when the pharmacists are getting that kickback.
Not when they're getting that kickback.
And that's the problem. You gotta stay on the meds.
You gotta stay on the meds, and that's the problem. It's the long-term use of them that I think is more long-term damaging. Just because there are so many free and accessible tools that actually train your body to heal itself. And so I just want to pop that out, because some people absolutely should and should continue to be on them, and and everybody's different, and that's the thing. And like there's so many other factors that play into it. But yeah, I knew it was about time to go. So right around the time, I'm working with the Black doula. I'm working with this amazing woman named Luna. She's Brazilian, and she had this whole thing called the Luna method. So I started getting really into Yoruba, like West African spirituality, which is older
Nigerian stuff, right?
It's older than Christianity. It's one of the oldest. I think it is the oldest recorded religion in the world.
I don't even think they call it a religion.
Yeah, it's not. It's just a way of life.
It's just like a way of life and worshiping deities and ancestors, basically.
Yeah, it's just basically worshiping the parts of yourself. It's parts work, original parts work. I come to find out IFS, Internal Family Systems, which is a really like popular thing everyone's talking about now, reading books now, like in the last, like I say, 10 or 15, 20 years. It's based on the Zulus, African, they've been doing that. And so I'm like, how many more of these things that people discover?
Yeah, exactly.
But really, like, there's some beautiful history behind it. Like, I'm really interested. You're going to start seeing a lot of this content for me. Because
I love it.
I'm on a mission. But yeah, so it was around that time that I started to really separate from white supremacy. I couldn't really finish my healing journey until I started to identify how I was perpetuating white supremacy in my own self. And it was heightened for a lot of us, and myself included, in 2020, when we all had to sit our behinds down because everything closed. We couldn't be distracted by all of the things we would normally do to distract ourselves. We all sat down and realized how unhealed we were. And right at that moment, everything happened with the civil rights movement with George Floyd. And what that showed to me, even though I had had several iterations, I actually was coming out of my second Dark Night of the Soul, which was way deeper, but because of the meditation training, I was way more conscious for it. So I didn't slip into a full depression. Dark Night of the Soul really isn't a depression. It can feel like it on a certain level, because you basically question everything you know about yourself. Which is a good thing to do from time to time, I think.
For sure.
Right? Like, and, but I did stop doing everything. I went from almost overnight from doing the most, doing all the aerial classes, going to every friend's birthday, running this, running that, to again, shutting down, laying down in bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this time it wasn't, I didn't get lost in it, because it was 10 years from the first one. And so I was able to sort of stay on top of the waves and see that I was asking myself, I was like, are you suicidal? Are you suicidal? Are you okay? You need to call somebody.
This was in 2020.
This was in 2018. So just before this happened, but it lasted for 2 years. What sparked
that though?
I think it was just spiritually time. I started doing CAP. I was doing CAP at that time. So I started receiving CAP.
So let's talk about that. I want to get into that, the Kundalini activation process. I'm really interested in the Kundalini energy and all these chakra things. So can you explain, obviously that started happening to you, and then now you are the one that's facilitating. Yes. But can you take me from the beginning?
Yes.
Okay.
So I first heard about it, and I had done Kundalini yoga training maybe in 2015 or 16. So I really loved Kundalini yoga. It had saved me that's when I really started like meditating very deeply and just like fasting. I started doing a lot of like cleansing and detoxing my body and Dr. Sebi. And I mean, it's so many things. It's hard to point to just one thing. It's like the confluence of so many things. But I remember seeing like a sign for CAP and like a advertisement, and it had said Kundalini. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I liked Kundalini energy. So I was like, let me go try this. Let me go. Put my little $50 down, and I went. And I remember being blown away because at the time I had a really like masculine like job in the entertainment industry where there was a lot of pressure. And so my whole right side was just jacked up. Like I had frozen shoulder in my right side. I had TMJ in my right jaw from not speaking. Like I was just basically like, I didn't know it, but like I was just like, my masculine side was just
wound up.
I was locked up on the right side. I just didn't have access, blood wasn't flowing to where it needed to be flowing. And as soon as I got in the session, it felt like my shoulder started like moving kind of on its own. Like I could stop, but if I caught it, like it's like I would notice it and then it would stop. But then like the second that I would not pay attention, it would just move. And it was like it was moving in a way that was like therapeutic, that was feeling good.
On its own,
but not on its own. Like it wasn't like I couldn't stop it. Yeah. It was just like that's what it wanted to do. It was what the energy wanted to do. And then my jaw started vibrating like faster than you could ever consciously move it. And I felt like
while somebody's like guiding you through this, or like
someone's in a room, they talk for a while, explain some crazy stuff that you're like, yeah, that's not gonna happen to me. And then you lay down and they play some music and they go around, and it takes like 20 minutes, like 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30. You don't really know. You feel really relaxed. It kind of just feels nice, like a sound bath. You ever been on a sound bath? Like just music's playing and you're relaxing down. But then all of a sudden you start to feel like tingles in your body, like you got butterflies in your stomach, but you weren't thinking about anything exciting. Or it's like your leg starts to feel like it fell asleep. You know how when your leg falls asleep, you start to feel parts of your body kind of going through that, but there's no reason. Like it wasn't like you were sitting funny for that to do that. So you start having these like kinetic, like these physiological responses to the energy, and the person's not touching you all the time. There's like 20 people in the room. They're like touching you sometimes they're not there. And then you can start feeling like overwhelming emotions out of nowhere, like not connected to anything. Like you just start crying, or you just start laughing, or you just start like shaking with fear, and you like realize that like you're responding to something that you don't understand, and it's like deeper than you, but it also feels really good. Like it feels really like I'm supposed to be feeling this way. Like I'm letting go of stuff.
How is that happening though?
I mean, it gets a little weird. So you mentioned,
is it the facilitator? That's
your own energy. Ego would say, oh, the facilitator is activating your energy systems from their energy systems. And there is a little bit of that co-regulation happening, but not really. I can say as a facilitator, it's like I nudge people, but it's their own systems that are doing it. I just create the container for people to heal themselves. That's all a healer does.
And it starts with what though, with the Kundalini? Like what does it start with?
So Kundalini is a fancy word for life force. It's a really old term, and because of its ancientness, it has a lot of names. So it's the exact same thing as Qi. That's known as Qi in Chinese medicine. So you ever heard like your Qi is blocked? That is Qi. Ashe, West African, talking about like the energy behind all things. Science calls it the morphogenetic field. They can measure its impact, but they can't measure it itself. But they acknowledge that something makes the acorn seed turn a certain way in the dirt, so life can happen, and so we can motherfucking be here.
Yeah.
Like they acknowledge that there's an intelligent, invisible network at work, but they can't quantify it exactly. But they're getting close. They're scratching around it. We're not too far off. We're starting to get the technique. You got to get a little bit quantum with it. You know what I mean? To really understand, because time also disappears with CAP. Because CAP is a mixture of Kundalini energy and then that non-duality that we talked about before, that non-dual, not two, that oneness. So what the non-dual does is that's really getting into stuff that Einstein was talking about in relativity, where like everything is one thing, but then it's not. Exactly. To me, that's why I like the number 8. 8's always been my favorite number, even when I was a little girl. Now I like it because it represents to me the symbol of infinity. And it's like, I think infinity is constantly coming back to one and then being separate so that we can come back to one.
Exactly.
So we can be separate. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's both things. Like it's duality and non-duality. I think non-duality couldn't exist without duality. So we are separate. We and you are different people. But like at the core of who we are, like we share something that makes us one thing. And that's why if you see something happen to me, you can have a physiological response.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Just like if something were to fall, you know what I mean? Or if I were to, like, we're connected, and you're connected to everything really on this planet, every living thing. But we're conditioned out of believing in that or recognizing that or acknowledging it. So it gets turned way down. I don't believe it gets turned off. Well, maybe in some motherfuckers it's turned off. I don't know.
Some people, that's what you call cold,
right? Like,
like if you're not feeling that,
right?
then, that's
like. I mean, you look at some of the actions people make, and I'm like, yeah, your pineal gland. To me, a lot of African traditions, like spirituality, talks about the pineal gland, which is the third eye center. And it's also kind of like what makes us a human being. And from a science term, it's what makes us feeling and empathy. And yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. Like, no one can exactly explain to you what Kundalini is. It's just a little bit too old. But I can tell you that it includes pranic energy, which is the same thing that people use in Reiki. So Reiki sessions are really popular right now too. And a lot of people who do Reiki end up going and doing becoming CAP facilitators too.
Wow.
Or, it's similar in nature, but yeah, it's more of an aligning to source. And so it's kind of outside of rational thought and reasoning. One thing about our brain is that the oldest part of our brain, the reptilian part is, the brain stem is the oldest part of our brain, and it connects us to our body. It's super old. The neofrontal cortex is it's like the logic and reasoning side of our brain, the part that makes us like human, where all our personality is, all of that stuff, right? And if you were to take the age difference between the two, like how young that part of your brain is compared to your brain stem, is like the difference between a 98-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Oh, really?
Like in the development, like it's brand new in the time, because then you have your limbic system, you know what I mean, which is also really old. Like and these things, that the limbic connects us to our emotions, and it's like in our memories, and it's like these things are more primal than our rational mind. So to me, I think talk therapy and rational mind thinking things through works with trauma that happened when you're old enough for that part of your brain to be really developed. You can talk your way through that kind of therapy. Talk therapy works. But if stuff happened to you in developmental trauma pre-language, talking, I don't know if words can get it. I think you got to get into your body. You got to go to your hips. You got to go to wherever you stored it. And move it. And movement to me is a big part of somatic. So to me, yoga, dance, all that's somatic therapy to me, the acting, anything expressive, music, like creation, being creative. Like, and
so that got you out of the second wave when you thought maybe, something was going to bring you down. That got you out of that.
Well, I wouldn't even say it got me out of it. That second Dark Night of the Soul was like, it was medicine. It made a lot of bullshit fall away. Right before I went into it, I was doing the most. Like, I was waking up at 6 a.m, like working out, then working a full day of work, then going to a pole class, and like going to a birthday party. Like, I was just like trying to do all the things you're supposed to do. I was eating health, and I was doing right things, but I was doing a lot of busy work, non-soul work, a lot of egoic work of just like what you're supposed to do. Exactly. Like the cool things you're supposed to do, stuff you're supposed to be buying, like all of that. And what that did was it just like knocked everything down. And what it allowed me to do was like rebuild from the bottom floor and like place new structures down that I couldn't have done any other way. You would need to demolish the whole building. So yeah, is that rough? If you're not conscious, I was fortunate at that point. I was conscious of what was happening. Like it was scary and weird, but I wasn't as afraid as I was the first time, because I was much older and I had much more awareness, because all the meditation had made me aware. So I was just constantly checking in with myself. Like, are you okay? Are you depressed? Are you sad? I was like, no, I'm not sad. I just have no desire to do any of the bullshit anymore.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And so then when I came, I was really kind of coming out of that at the beginning of 2020, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna like start like doing stuff again. I'm gonna start rebuild. Like, I knew it was time for me to start moving again. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like kind of confused. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just keep doing what I was. What everyone was doing during the pandemic was what I was already doing since 2018.
Exactly.
Like, I was already like just kind of shutting down and like going within and detoxing, and and so it was just another round of that. And I was like, great, I can just keep doing it. And then all that stuff happened with the racial trauma coming forward for me, where I realized how I was enabling just some white supremacist views that I had about myself. The fact that I wouldn't let myself rest, the fact that I felt guilty for taking time off or taking a vacation, like all of that is connected.
Yeah, that's crazy.
To me, to white supremacy. Like it's connected.
Yeah, I mean, essentially.
Like you should basically end work, get back to work.
Yeah.
That's what I was constantly. I wanted to be this free flowing goddess, but it was also like
You're having too much fun.
You're having too much fun. You're taking too much luxury. Who are you to be enjoying this? You should be feeling guilty for these people in your family or these people in this area of the world. Or I just really wasn't letting myself express full joy. And so it all kind of came to me at the same time that like the realization that I wasn't doing anyone any favors by holding back my joy. And that there was absolutely no reason why I couldn't live at the places I wanted to live, Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. I really could have always moved and done that. My work was always remote. I'm a filmmaker, you know what I mean? So it's like I always could have done it, but it just gave me the courage to. And also, I'll be honest, like with the George Floyd stuff, it made me realize how racist, like infrastructurally, like the inability for people that I cared about who were white to see that this was an ongoing thing and for them to be like shocked that this was still happening. While I was like, of course this happens. Yeah. It just made me realize, we're not really communicating. I don't really communicate what my life experiences from you because I've always prioritized your feelings over mine. Mm-hmm. And I had to like really divorce that part of myself that would lower or like raise the volume of my experience as a human being, as a Black person, depending on other people's comfortability level. Yeah. And that's when I stopped code switching. That's when I started saying like, that's racist in like production meetings, like just, and I thought there's lots of times I was like, I'm going to get fired. Like I'm over here telling this group of like white Jewish men, like that this line in this movie is racist and they're probably going to fire me because I wasn't nice about it. I just kind of blurted it out.
And did they fire you though?
No. What was amazing is that there would be this awkward pause. And then like this like collection of themselves, and then they would like I got more work. Like they respected me more, and I was like I should have been done doing this. Like it's a lie that we have to like bend and stoop and show. Because as much as my parents raised me to be very pro-Black, they also sort of made a lot of cop-outs of like, yep, that's just how white people are. Like you
got to play the game.
You got to play the game.
My dad would always say, you got to play the game.
That's exactly it.
I'm like, game?
That's exactly it.
The game for too damn long,
my dad used to always
say, tired of playing the game.
Right? My dad used to always say, you got to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I grew up believing that. And I'm like, now I got to be at that age. Like in 2020, I was like, I don't want to sign up for that.
Exactly.
Twice as hard to get half as far. That sounds like 4 times as much work. Like,
yeah.
Like I don't want to do that. I don't agree with that. And so I feel like our generation, because of our aunts, because of our parents, and because of our grandparents, the work that they did, I don't discredit them for what they, like they grew up in a different time, but we are able to say like, no, that's racist, and it's not okay. Like we're gonna change it. And I feel like our generation is more about like we're not gonna tolerate it, and that's part of why I left the U.S. was because all that happened, and I just really felt like, and then like the Trump stuff, and then this is really what did it. There was this story of this girl, this Black woman was at a traffic stop somewhere in like middle America. And for no reason, literally some white supremacists just drove up and just like threw like fire on her and lit her on fire. She lived, but that was when I was like, I gotta go. I did not even hear about that. No, a lot of people didn't even hear about it. I mean, you can still Google it. It's still out there. But that moment happened to me and I was like, I don't fit in this hole anymore.
Yeah, because like at the point where I left, I just realized that system there, that's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Like you can't change it. So yeah, so you were kind of feeling like this can't be fixed.
I just felt like
in this lifetime.
I feel like it can be fixed. I feel like it's going to come from consciousness, not from rah, not from argument. It's going to come from people's laying down and doing shit like Cat. I'll be real. Yeah. Realizing that we're each other, and I think we're in the middle of seeing a global transformation on that level, and I think we'll live to see it. I do. I hope. Right. But for me, it was more like, I just don't deserve this. Like when I tried to think about the Jameelah that would stay in America and then just, okay, every time I get to a traffic stop, I'll just make sure the door is locked. Like when I try to think about like what I'll just have a fire extinguisher. Like when I try to think about how I could change my life to feel safe with, it just wasn't happening. It's like, That's not me. Yeah, I reject that reality. And I'm going to go somewhere else because it's almost like anywhere but here. Like, and I thought if I don't like it, I had a backup plan because I got led to Costa Rica with the ancestors to Puerto Viejo specifically. I didn't go anywhere else. I came straight here. It was definitely a download.
How did you get here?
The ancestors.
That's crazy.
The ancestors were
so you had no friends, nobody here.
Nobody.
Wow.
It was literally like so after I did CAP and I started doing CAP like in 2017, 2018. Had Dark Night of the Soul. Still was doing CAP. That really helped too. I think that's also why it didn't turn into a depression. But yeah, it was like at that certain point, really what CAP did was it really connected me to my ancestors, like on a physical. I know that sounds crazy, but like on a physical.
No, I feel you.
I feel them.
Yeah.
And I can sense them, and I can sense when things are right for me and when things are wrong for me. And the way that they communicate is through like little things like either coincidences or like repetition, like synchronicities will come. It'll usually be in threes at least. And now it'll even be quicker than that. Like it's pretty quick. And also like I started to distrust. You start gambling. Like you'll get a feeling like, oh, I should do this, and you'll think that's crazy, but then you just try it and it works out. And so you're like, okay.
Right about
and
that.
then they'll do bigger and bigger. So it's like you're having a conversation almost with like these.
You're like, is this gonna work out? Oh shit,
it worked out. They right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you start putting more and more trust, more and more weight in the unseen. And so by the time that they were like, you need to go to Costa Rica, I was like, I'm gonna go. Cause like every time, also I started noticing every time that I didn't kind of listen, that things wouldn't get pretty. Like they were telling me these things for a reason. Like I have heard words like almost I can't even tell you.
Like telepathy type things?
It's almost like telepathy. It's for me, it almost shows up like as a knowing. Like an inner feeling. It's almost like certain, like if I'm looking at a piece of paper, it's like something will glow almost. It's not glowing, but it's almost like
I feel you.
Like I'm drawn to something, and then other things that seem really right. Sometimes it's like like I have like this sinking feeling in my body, like I ate something bad, and it's not that strong. It's like maybe 2% of eating something bad, but you know what I mean. It's like, but it's subtle. It's like it's a sensitivity that I think was always there. But now, like when you do things like CAP or Reiki or breath work, you start to develop like a sensitivity where you can actually feel it and become aware of it. You know, like we can resensitize ourselves. Like our ancestors were like, you know what I mean? Like connected to like what's going on around you.
So do you feel like finally when you moved to Costa Rica, I don't know, I feel powered up here. Like, do you feel powered up? Like when you're in the jungle, you feel like the energy is like basically like amplified.
I feel like our manifestations here are definitely amplified. When I first came, the energy here like gave me such deep rest. Like I don't even think I was really sleeping in LA because there was so much psychic, like frenetic energy where I was. I think I was just like laying there with my eyes closed. Like I don't know. Like I just can't tell you. The rest I get in Puerto Viejo is just different.
It's different. It's different.
And I remember waking up crying with tears in my eyes from joy, like in Davi's container units, like in Playa Negra, looking out the window because I could hear the birds chirping, and like my nervous system was just finally able to really relax outside of that system. And it's almost like you can't get clean in the same place you got dirty.
Nah,
you got to get out of where you got dirty, get clean, and then when you go back, maybe so much won't be able to get on you. But it's like you got to kind of see the world. You know, I think it's really important for people to travel and see how other people live, because
that's a fact.
People here they're not chasing the bag in the same way, to the point where it can be annoying, where it's like these people are supposed to be coming to like fix something in your house, they show up 2 days later.
They don't care.
They don't care. They're not trying to Puerto Viejo, they're not trying to amass wealth with this fear the way that Americans are. They're like, no, it's a beautiful day, I'm gonna go fishing. Like they care about different things. And like just being around where that's the status quo, and like it just like I kept feeling like I kept going like, like I just literally was being like massaged by the energy here, like chill baby, chill.
It's just the jungle, man. It just holds you. It holds you, it calms you down, and then like things start falling into perspective.
And then I felt powered up once I was able to really rest. But I definitely had this like 6 months where I rested. But then I started just manifesting mad coin, and I manifested the money to do the training for CAP, which is not cheap. It is definitely, it's 5 figures. It is a lot of money because there's not a lot of people that can
tell me
teach.
about that. Tell me about that. So basically you would be a certified person to administer CAP to people. Can you explain that? Because that's kind of what that's a real important thing that I wanted to like talk to you about, because like with the Kundalini, I'm super interested in these like bodily functions of like the chakras and stuff. I'm like, how do I act? How can I do this without having to pay these astronomical amounts of money.
You
to
can
get
do
done.
it yourself. Like it's everyone's birthright.
So let's explain to the people.
I'm explaining to the people what
Kundalini
it is.
activation.
Kundalini activation. So Kundalini activation. So the way that the training works is you pay to basically sit with a master, somebody who's spent their entire life training with this energy, and their field is so powerful that they can actually change your field enough that you can now carry that forward. Mm-hmm. And that's actually really ancient. There's been a lot of different healing modalities that have been passed through that way. Usually, like in the past, it was more one-to-one. Like another energy training that's very similar to CAP in some ways, it's Kundalini energy, it's Satnam Rasayan, and that was passed from disciple, like guru to disciple, one per generation. It's non-verbally. The disciple would sit in the presence of the guru all day for years and years and years, 30, 40 years. There, through the energetic field, that person would gain the knowledge, and then the guru would die, pass on, and the disciple would become the guru, and then they would take a disciple. And this healing modality went on for tens of thousands of years until about the 70s, where Guru Dev was the new guru to be, and he was told by his guru, don't just pass it to one person, pass it to, you need to teach as many people as you can. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand that consciousness is also awakening right now. It's doing something different than it's ever done. So that's why Bennett Wong, the creator of CAP, he took two ancient things and put them together. He created it, but he took two things that already existed and just put them together in a way that hadn't been done before. Wow. And the reason that he can do that and pass it on now is because the collective unconscious is sensitive enough to do it. I think 100 years ago, we would have had to go up to the top of a mountain and cut off all communication with, you know what I mean? And like done it the old fashioned way kind of. Now I transmit CAP to people on Zoom. Wow. And people be having like out of body experiences from Zoom.
That's crazy.
I know it's crazy. And it's like, and I'm like, this shit is crazy, but it's not. It's like, that's how powerful our energy is. And when you think about it from a scientific level and put down the spirituality, just think about it from science. Like, we know that like your body, the electrical currents in your body are powerful enough to light New York City for a week. Yeah. Like, you are so powerful. Your thoughts and intentions are so powerful that marketers spend billions of dollars a year just to try to get you to buy their shit. Mm-hmm. Because your power, you know what I mean? Like, they know that your mind, they want to brainwash you basically enough to buy their stuff because they know your mind is that powerful. We got to get in there too, basically. And that's what I see CAP being. So what you do is you do the training, and he just caps the shit out of you for 5 days. I don't know what else to say. Like, you just get capped. You just keep messing capped in your head. And you get to a point where you like, first ones you're like, oh, this is great. You know, that's what you normally do as a student. And the second one you're like, oh, this is extra great. And third one you're like, all right, I'm really still processing what happened in the first two. But that fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, you're just like, I can't do anymore. Like, I can't cry anymore. I can't release anymore. There's nothing left. And then that music starts playing. You lay down on that mat, and those thoughts immediately leave, and you're immediately back in it. And it's like, There's still more. And yeah, I don't know. All I know to say is that there is a power in this earth that loves us so much. It is so intelligent. It is benevolent. I don't care what you call it, whether you call it Allah, Jesus, the angels, ancestors, or if you just call it your subconscious motherfucking mind. There is something wiser than your conscious mind that when you let it take over, it will just tell you exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And it will also clear out all of your channels. So like stuff that used to bother you doesn't bother you anymore. Mm-hmm. Whether that's physical, emotional, spiritual, it will work on every level. And it's crazy how it works in every person. Like, but differently.
That's amazing.
It's really the most beautiful thing that I've ever witnessed, and no one can explain it. It is not something that this part of our brain can explain. But the second you feel it, you'll be like, "Oh, I know what this is." It's like it's like down here. Like that is where it starts. Like it's who we are.
See.
I hope that helped.
Did that come from? That didn't come from the Yoruba culture, did it? I mean,
it was. I think it's even older than human beings. So it was here, and different cultures called it different things.
Oh, but they use different ways.
Yoruba called it ashe. The Chinese ancestors called it chi. Southeast Asians called it.
So it's just like different.
It's just different words for the same energy, and it's the exact same energy. There's no. It's older than time.
Nice.
I think it's as old as us.
I'm gonna put Jameelah's information in the notes on the video so that if anybody wants any more information, they can go to her page and get in contact with her, because this is really good information.
It's really beautiful, and I love seeing us do it. I started to really focus on melanated folks in these sessions, and I just set the intention just real loosely, like in November, a couple months ago, just like what? I just even thought the thought, like, it'd be curious if I had more sessions that were just all Aboriginal folks. Like, what would that be like? And then it's just been happening. Like,
Nice.
It's just been happening every other time. I mean, I like sharing cap with everyone, but it gets really ancestral. My transmission, it's because every cap facilitator is also a little bit different because we all come from different backgrounds. I came from my background of studying all these different African spiritualities and breath work and this and that. Other people come from different backgrounds. And so everyone's transmission is a little bit different. And mine is it does open up a lot of ancestral experiences, even for people who are non-Aboriginal. They will come back and be like, yeah, I had a dream about this, like stuff that's spot on. Like,
have you done any plant medicine?
Oh yeah.
You've done ayahuasca before?
Yes, probably like
how
8
would you
times.
How would you compare? Is there even a comparison?
Yes, there is. A lot of people, like when I feel like Mel, Mel, the yoga coach here.
Yes.
She said that was just like, a lot of people sit up after cap who've done a good amount of ayahuasca, and they're like, that was just like ayahuasca minus the vomiting. Because it's like, instead of 8 hours or all 12 hours, it's like an hour, but you go just as deep. It's also like people do a lot of psilocybin, or like that was a lot like a mushroom trip. People do a lot of DMT, like, because basically all those chemicals exist in your brain already. Similar the medicines just usually inhibit or do certain things to allow those chemicals to flow, and then you're in those states. But your brain can just do that shit on its own.
Yeah.
And so the energy literally gives you what you need. That's what I like about cap. You can't overdose on it. You can't underdose on it. Like, it gives you what you need.
It's not like you're taking something.
It's nothing external.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just your own body's wisdom. And so it'll give you, that's why I'm saying people I have people who come and like truly terrified, like, oh, I'm not ready to have a big experience. Just do me a little bit. I'm like, no, it's not.
Your body's going to do it.
Your body's going to give you you want a little bit, you'll just get a little bit. You'll just get a few sensations, and then you'll have more courage the next time to let go more. And what I like about cap too is there's nothing to do. That's also throws a lot of people. They're like, wait, I have to breathe a certain way, right? Or no, your only job is to like just relax. And that's so hard for some people because your mind wants to like make it happen, but you can't. If you try to make it happen, you ever like done shrooms or something and you like waiting for it to eat?
I never do that. Okay. I'm always just like waiting.
Because if you watch it, it'll never happen.
It'll never happen.
And the second that you forget, you all of a sudden you're like, oh,
yep.
That's exactly how it works. It's the exact same type of relaxation.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit.
I gotta get me a cap session, man. I gotta see what all the hype's about.
Tomorrow. You should come tomorrow.
I gotta see what all the hype's about for real, because I want to take all these things and try to just I think all these things are just mind expansion.
They are.
And just like experiencing different energies and seeing where it takes you.
It's our birthright. It's our natural state. I think we're all going to end up being in that state more often because it's almost like you're just more powerful. You're like more yourself.
Because now when you can control these things, then you don't need the facilitator. Then it becomes a lifestyle.
No.
Like for you, it's probably a lifestyle.
It is a lifestyle. And I tell people after the first session, I'm like, you don't need me. Like, yeah, you may want to, it's easier to do it, or in a field with someone who's doing it, like anything is. But like, this is something you can cultivate on your own. And that's what I also was drawn to with studying cap, is that Bennett is very non-egoic. Like, he does not want to be a guru. He's nobody's guru. He'll be quick to tell you, there's no guru system. There's no one to worship. A lot of these like I think they're cults. You know what I mean? Where you have, where ego is basically very present. All Bennett looks for, because people say like, oh, what do you have to do to be a facilitator? They're not looking for other trainings you've done or anything. They're just looking for purity of spirit. Like lack of ego, because it's I don't know, it just stands apart from that part of our brain that tries to control everything. It's a beautiful thing.
For sure. Well, I'm gonna wrap up this episode because I don't want it to be too long, but as I said, I'm gonna put all your information in description, so if anybody wants to get with you and get some more information on that, they can. Thanks for talking to me. I love you. This video is sponsored by Love Apparel, of course. I'm going to put that link in the bio as well.
Love is the answer.
But appreciate you guys. We'll see you soon.
Oh, love you.
Cap feels like flying through the air. Cap feels like floating on water.
My physical body was disappearing, and I just felt like being energy and surrender to everything around me. It felt like floating in the ocean.
Cat feels like forgiveness for yourself, forgiveness for others.